At 4:43 on a Thursday afternoon, an old man in work boots set a dented metal lunchbox on the polished counter of Halston Regional Bank. Not a briefcase, not a leather folder, a lunchbox, blue paint peeling off the sides, a faded sticker of a fish on the lid, the kind of box a man keeps bolts in, or sandwiches, not secrets. The teller looked at it, then at him, then at the short brass key in his hand. "Can I help you, sir?" The man nodded once, slowly, like he didn't enjoy repeating himself. "I'm here for my locker." The teller blinked. "Your what?" "My locker." He slid the key across the counter. "Tiny tag. Stamp number 317. Something about that made the young guy at the next station lean over. He looked at the number, smirked, then looked at the old man's jacket, his cracked fingernails, the cuff of his shirt with one button missing, and he laughed. Not loud, just enough. The kind of laugh people use when they don't think it counts. "Sir," he said, "if this is one of those old boxes from the basement vault, there's probably nothing in there but dust." A couple standing nearby glanced over. The old man didn't react, didn't stiffen, didn't snap back. He just rested one hand on the lunchbox and said, almost gently, "Before you say no." He opened the box, reached under a folded hand towel, and pulled out a brittle yellow paper dated May 14th, 1971. That's when the branch manager stopped smiling. Because the paper didn't just prove the locker existed. It proved the bank had been wrong for 55 years. And by the time that vault was opened, the old man everyone had dismissed as a nuisance was worth more than the people laughing at him. But to understand why that one sheet of paper changed the room, you need to know who he was and why he waited so long to come back. His name was Elias Mercer. Most people called him Eli. 68 years old. Thin the way working men get thin. Not from gyms. From years. From ladders, cold mornings, cheap coffee, lifting things alone because asking for help feels slower. He had the kind of face that looked permanently sun-tired. Not sad, just weathered. He'd spent 32 years working maintenance at a public high school 40 miles outside the city. Replaced broken lockers, fixed leaking pipes, repainted gym lines every summer. Kids barely noticed him. Teachers depended on him. And if you asked anyone in that town about Eli Mercer, they'd usually say the same thing. Quiet man. Then, after a second, good man. He lived in the same small house his mother left him. Drove a 1998 Ford that started only if you turned the key halfway first. Kept cash in labeled envelopes in a kitchen drawer. Paid every bill by mail. Folded grocery receipts in half, then half again. Called every woman over 30-inch, ma'am. And when he got nervous, he rubbed the corner of his thumb with his index finger like he was checking for sawdust that wasn't there. He wasn't the kind of man banks notice, which was exactly why that afternoon went the way it did. The teller took the paper like it might tear in his fingers. It was a carbon copy, yellowed, crisp at the folds. The header read, Farmers and Merchants Trust Company, not Halston Regional. That bank hadn't existed in decades. Mergers swallowed it. Names changed. Signs changed. Men in framed portraits changed. But paper Paperweights. The teller scanned the page and frowned. What exactly is this? Eli's voice stayed flat. Lease agreement. Safe deposit locker, box 317. The young employee from the next station leaned closer again. He was still wearing that little smile. From 1971? Eli nodded. The guy gave a short laugh. Sir, our records don't go back like that. Eli looked at him for the first time. Really looked at him. Not angry. Just steady. That's why I brought mine. Something about the line landed harder than it should have. The teller cleared his throat and said he'd get the manager. Now, most people would think this story starts at the bank. It doesn't. It starts in a narrow kitchen in 1971 with a woman named Lillian Mercer standing under a humming light, counting insurance money from her husband's death. Lillian was Eli's mother, widowed at 42, house cleaner, church pianist when they needed one, stubborn enough to survive almost anything. Her husband, Thomas, had been killed in a sawmill accident that spring. The company paid out, not a fortune, but enough to change a small life if handled carefully. Relatives told her to move. A cousin told her to buy a nicer car. One man suggested she should remarry fast while she was still young enough. Lillian ignored all of them. She paid off the house, set aside money for Eli, and did one thing nobody expected. She bought stock. Not in oil, not in railroads, in the local bank. Back then, Farmers and Merchants was small, boring, profitable. The kind of institution older people trusted because the same men shook the same hands every Sunday. Lillian cleaned houses for 2 directors' families. She listened more than she talked. And what she learned was simple. Rich people didn't keep all their money in one place. They hid value in plain paper. Shares, certificates, deeds. Things ordinary people overlooked because they weren't shiny. So Lillian bought a block of shares through the bank's dividend plan and placed the certificates in a safe deposit locker. Box 317. Then she wrote down everything. Fees, dates, names, renewal terms, and one sentence Eli would remember for the rest of his life. If anybody ever acts like you don't belong, make them read before you argue. He was 19 then, restless, still full of young man noise. He didn't understand why she trusted paper more than people. He would later, a lot later, back at the bank, the branch manager walked over with practiced politeness. His name tag read Daniel Webb, mid-40s, good suit, controlled smile, the kind of man who could sound helpful while denying you something important. Mr. Mercer? Eli nodded. Daniel glanced at the paper, then at the key, then at the lunchbox. We appreciate you bringing this in, he said. But these older boxes were migrated through multiple institutions. In many cases, if fees went unpaid or contents were deemed abandoned, the state would have taken custody years ago. He said it smoothly, like it should have ended there. Like the sentence itself was the door closing. Eli didn't move. My mother prepaid. Daniel gave him a thin smile. Prepaid what, exactly? The lease. For how long? Eli tapped the paper once. Read line 7. Daniel's smile weakened. Just a little. He lowered his eyes and read. There it was. typed in faded purple ink, nearly lost at the edge of the page. Annual rental for Box 317 to be deducted from dividend credit balance attached to account holder securities held in custody file until balance is exhausted or box surrendered. Daniel read it again. Slower. The rune changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. The teller stopped, pretending to organize receipts. The young employee leaned back. The couple waiting nearby went quiet, because that one sentence meant something ugly. It meant if the bank had continued receiving dividend credits connected to Lillian Mercer securities, the box should never have been treated like a neglected little orphan from another era. It should have remained active. Daniel's tone shifted. Do you have identification? Eli slid over his license. And proof you are next of kin? Eli opened the lunchbox again. Another envelope. Another fold of paper. A death certificate. A probate order from 2001. Neat. Protected. Ready? Daniel took them. And for the first time, he no longer looked irritated. He looked nervous. That's the thing about people in power. You can hear the exact second confidence leaves their voice. It gets softer first, then more careful. Then suddenly, every sentence becomes policy. Mr. Mercer, if you'll just give us a few minutes, I'll need to verify this with operations. A few minutes became 21. Eli sat in a vinyl chair near the desk with the lunchbox on his lap. He didn't scroll a phone. Didn't pace. Didn't sigh. Just watched the office windows as people inside started making calls they did not expect to make that day. At 5 o'clock, the lobby officially closed. The security guard locked the front doors. Customers left. Lights dimmed over the teller line. Eli stayed. Nobody told him to leave. That by itself told him plenty. A young woman from customer service finally brought him water in a paper cup. Her name was Marissa. She set it down carefully and said, almost in a whisper, I'm sorry about earlier. Eli nodded. He wasn't interested in punishing the wrong people. That's another thing about men like Eli. They don't waste anger where it won't build anything. While he waited, his mind drifted backward. Not to numbers, to his mother's hands. Always dry from bleach. Always warm. She had shown him box 317 only twice. Once in 1978. Once in 1989. The second time was after a big merger when the old bank sign came down and new people took over. He remembered how Lillian stood in the vault, purse tucked under one arm, watching employees replace files and rename forms. Names change fast, she'd said. Ownership changes slow. Don't confuse the two. Inside the box were envelopes, certificates, and one long white document with raised seals. Eli barely paid attention. He was 37 then. Busy. Working double shifts. Married for a short time. Trying, unsuccessfully, to become the kind of man who could outrun worry. His mother had asked him to memorize the box number. 317. He smiled. I know. Say it anyway. 317. Then she closed the box and looked at him hard. If I'm gone, don't let anybody tell you paper expires just because it got old. He remembered laughing. Not cruelly. Just young. He wasn't laughing now. Back in the present, Daniel Webb returned from the office with a woman Eli hadn't seen before. Navy blazer. Silver-framed glasses. No name tag. Legal or compliance. You could tell by the way she carried no small talk in her face. "Mr. Mercer," Daniel said, "this is Miss Carver from Regional Operations. We've located partial archival records." Partial, a careful word, used when full records might be a problem. Miss Carver sat across from him. "Your mother's box appears to have remained listed under custodial status through at least 1998. After a systems conversion, the Associated Securities file was separated from the branch ledger." Eli said nothing. She continued, "We are prepared to grant supervised access to the box this evening." Prepared to grant. As if they were doing him a favor. Eli rubbed his thumb once. "Good," Daniel added quickly. "However, any negotiable instruments, expired certificates, or legacy assets may no longer hold active value. In many cases, these documents become purely historical." There was the second dismissal. Cleaner this time. More polished. Not laughter, but the same thing wearing a tie. Eli looked at him. "My mother didn't pay $14 a year for Historical Week." Daniel didn't answer. And if you're wondering why Eli never checked the box after his mother died, that part matters too. Grief makes ordinary tasks strange. After Lillian passed in 2001, Eli handled the funeral, the church food, the probate hearing, the sorting of clothes, the casseroles, the neighbors telling stories, the silence after. Then life did what life does. Bills, work. A divorce already half dead before it officially ended. A sister who moved to Arizona. A roof that leaked. A back injury that never quite healed. He knew the box existed. He had the key. But every time he thought about going, he heard his mother's voice so clearly it felt like opening the vault would mean admitting she was really gone. So he waited. Then years became one of those things people mean to do soon. Until 2 months before that Thursday, when a letter arrived. Not from the bank. From a records contractor handling dormant account cleanups. It was badly addressed. His name misspelled. The wording cold. Possible abandoned property associated with legacy financial relationship. Respond within 60 days. Most people would have tossed it. It looked like junk. Eli almost did. But at the bottom was a reference number. And next to that, 3 digits. 317. He went to the hall closet, reached behind an old toolbox, found the lunchbox, found the key, found the paper, and took a bus into the city the next morning to make sure he understood what the bank was about to do. That's why he was still there after closing. That's why his jaw stayed set. Because whatever was inside that locker didn't just belong to him. It belonged to the only person in his life who had ever planned beyond her own suffering. The vault was in the basement. Cold air. Concrete walls. 1 camera in each corner. Rows of metal boxes. Most of them newer than Eli remembered. Box 317 sat low, near knee height. Small. Scuffed. Ordinary. You could have walked past it 100 times. Daniel knelt with the guard key. Eli held his own. For a second, neither man moved. Daniel cleared his throat. "You can proceed, Mr. Mercer." Eli inserted the key. Turned. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. Daniel shifted awkwardly. These older locks can seize. Miss Carver stepped closer. "If necessary, we can schedule a drill procedure." Not today, Eli said. He leaned in, closer, wiped the key once on his sleeve, then tried with a softer hand. A tiny click. Then another. The box slid forward half an inch. No one spoke. Eli pulled it out, set it on the narrow shelf. Inside were 5 large envelopes tied with a cloth ribbon, 1 metal tin, and a folded letter on top, written in Lillian Mercer's hand. He saw her writing and had to stop for a second. Actually stop. Not theatrically. Not in some movie way. His shoulders just went still. The room waited. He unfolded the letter. Read the first line. Then lowered it. Miss Carver spoke carefully. Would you like privacy? Eli swallowed. No. Let's finish it. He opened the first envelope. Stock certificates. Heavy paper. Embossed seals. Farmers and Merchants Trust Company. Then later certificates from its successor. Then merger notices. Conversion statements. Dividend reinvestment confirmations. The second envelope contained updated share tallies through the 1980s and 1990s. The third held correspondence never delivered after an address error. The fourth held bond coupons. The fifth held 1 handwritten inventory list from Lillian. The metal tin contained 2 gold wedding bands and a church photo. Daniel looked relieved for half a second when he saw the old certificates. Then Miss Carver took one. Her face changed. She checked the issue number. Then another. Then the merger statement. Her eyes narrowed. She asked Daniel for a calculator. He didn't have one. Of course he didn't. He used his phone. She read numbers quietly. Shares converted here. Split there. Acquisition ratio there. Then dividend reinvestment. Then another merger. She stopped. Started again. When people realize a mistake may be expensive, they recalculate as if math might become kinder the second time. It rarely does. Daniel's voice came out dry. What are we looking at? Miss Carver didn't answer immediately. She kept reading. Then she looked at Eli. Mr. Mercer, did your mother ever liquidate any of these holdings? No. Did you? I just opened the box. She nodded once. Very slowly. Then she said the sentence that flipped the whole story. These certificates were never worthless. They were converted. Daniel stared at her. She continued. The original position carried through 3 corporate events. With splits, share exchanges, and credited reinvestments, the estimated current value is... She stopped again. Checked once more. Approximately $1,738,000. Silence. Real silence. Not the kind people describe. The kind you feel in your ears. Daniel looked at the certificates like they might accuse him personally. The guard blinked. Marissa, who had come down with a file, froze halfway through the doorway. And Eli, he didn't smile. That surprised everybody. Because men who've spent most of their lives with very little know something other people don't. Money arriving suddenly doesn't feel like joy at first. It feels like danger. Like there must be a catch. Daniel recovered before anyone else. We'd of course need full validation through transfer agents and historical dividend reconciliation. Miss Carver cut him off. There's more. She lifted one of the separated statements from the second envelope. Associated dividend credits were not fully exhausted for lease charges. Daniel frowned. She looked up. That means the box should never have been flagged for abandonment. Not in 2008, not last quarter, and not now. Now the problem was bigger than value. Now it was liability. Because if the bank had almost transferred or liquidated property tied to an active custodial relationship, somebody at a much higher pay grade was about to have a long week. Daniel crouched lower, suddenly eager to help. Mr. Mercer, perhaps we should move upstairs to discuss immediate next steps. Immediate. Another careful word. On the way up, his tone changed again. He called him Mr. Mercer every single time now. Offered coffee. Offered a private office. Offered overnight document handling. Offered a courier. Offered apologies shaped like procedures. Then quietly came the first offer. Not officially, just conversationally. If you prefer simplicity, Daniel said, the bank could potentially facilitate a direct purchase of the legacy paper position once verified. Avoid delays, avoid transfer friction. Eli looked at him. How simple. Daniel folded his hands. We'd need to review, of course, but an immediate settlement in the range of $500,000 could be discussed very quickly. There it was. Low. Fast. Clean. And if Eli had been the kind of man they took him for when he walked in. Tired, confused, grateful to be noticed. That might have worked. But Daniel had made one mistake hours earlier. He thought old meant easy. Eli reached into the lunchbox and pulled out Lillian's folded letter. He read it properly this time. Her handwriting shook in places. But the words were clear. Eli, if you're reading this, don't let anybody rush you, because their voice sounds official. That usually means the hurry is theirs, not yours. He folded the letter once, set it down, then looked at Daniel. I'll wait. That might have been the most expensive sentence spoken in that building all year. The verification took 11 days. Transfer agents, archive ledgers, microfilm from a storage facility in Ohio. A law firm that suddenly returned calls very fast. By the end of it, the number changed. Not down. Up. The final valuation of the equity position, including properly credited corporate conversions and accumulated cash dividends sitting in dormant linked accounts, came to $2,184,611.42 before taxes. The bank sent a formal apology. Not warm, not human, formal, very careful. It acknowledged record fragmentation, legacy system migration, and procedural deficiencies. It did not mention laughter. Paper rarely records tone. But Eli remembered tone just fine. A regional vice president invited him in personally to restore confidence. He went. Same bank. Different room. This time there was bottled water with labels facing outward and a plate of untouched pastries between them. The vice president apologized. Longer. Better rehearsed. Then asked how Eli planned to use the funds. That question always reveals people. Some ask because they care. Some ask because they need a story. Eli answered simply. Roof first. The man smiled politely. Eli continued. My granddaughter's tuition. Pause. Then I'm fixing the boiler at the high school gym if the district lets me donate quietly. The vice president nodded, clearly expecting something grander. No yacht. No revenge shopping. No dramatic exit, just the life of a man whose first instinct after receiving millions was still to repair what leaks. He did buy one unnecessary thing: a recliner, brown leather, good back support, paid cash. Sat in it the first night and laughed alone in his living room because his mother would have said it was too expensive. Then he cried. Not because of the money, because he wished she'd lived long enough to see that she had been right. Completely right. About paper. About patience. About how quickly rooms change when numbers move in your favor. A month later, Eli went back to the bank one last time. Not for business. For the lunchbox. He had accidentally left it under the chair in the office during one of the transfer meetings. Marissa brought it out to him. She smiled. A real smile this time. No fish sticker, she said. Someone had peeled it off while cleaning. Eli looked at the blank patch where it used to be. That's all right. She hesitated. Then asked a question she'd clearly been holding. Did you know? He thought about that. About the bus ride in. About the paper. About line 7. About the way his mother saved everything like the world was always one careless clerk away from forgetting poor people existed. Finally, he said, I knew enough not to let them tell me nothing was there. That line stayed with her. Probably because it applies to more than money. A few months later, the story traveled through town the way true stories do. Crookedly. People exaggerated. Some said Eli found gold bars. Some said diamonds. Some said the bank paid him hush money. None of that was true. The truth was quieter. And better. A widow bought boring stock. Saved every document. Prepaid a small locker from dividend credits. Died. And left behind a paper trail stronger than a modern system. Her son walked into a bank looking like a man people overlook every day. And because he was calm enough to let other people underestimate him, he got to watch the room correct itself in real time. That's the satisfying part, isn't it? Not the money. Not really. It's the shift. That tiny, perfect shift. When mockery turns into caution. When dismissal turns into Mr. Mercer. When the person no one takes seriously becomes the one everyone starts listening to. But the real power in this story wasn't in the vault. It was in the waiting. In the fact that Eli didn't beg, didn't ramble, didn't try to sound important. He simply showed up prepared. And that unsettles people more than anger ever will. Because anger they can manage. Preparation? Preparation is dangerous. Especially when it comes from someone they already decided was small. By the spring after the settlement, Eli had paid for his granddaughter Nora's nursing degree. Replaced the roof. Donated money, quietly, to the school district for repairs in the gym wing he used to maintain. He also created a small scholarship in his mother's name for students going into accounting, trades, or nursing. Practical things. Lillian would have approved. No plaque bigger than necessary. No photo op. Just her name on paper again. Where she always seemed strongest. In box 317, he kept the key. Not because it still opened anything important. The box was closed after the contents were transferred. He kept it because of what it reminded him. Some doors don't open because you forced them. They open because you kept the right proof. And maybe that's the part people should hear twice. Not every weak-looking person is weak. Not every old document is dead. And not every quiet man is lost. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the only one who actually knows what the room is worth. So if you take anything from Eli Mercer's story, let it be this. Never laugh at what you haven't bothered to read. Because one yellow page from 1971 can outweigh a whole building full of confidence. And if you were Eli, would you have taken the bank's first $500,000 offer? Or waited to find out what the paper was really worth? If this story hit you, tell me in the comments. And be honest.